The galaxy's strongest force in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, there was a name feared by all, the Varkari. This military force was the strongest and most brutal in the entire universe. Their ships were massive, faster than light, and armed with weapons that could tear through entire planets. Their warriors were unmatched in skill and strength, and their commanders were ruthless. No one ever challenged them, and no one ever won. The Varkari had conquered countless worlds, destroying anyone who dared oppose them. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems, and their soldiers had never lost a battle. They were a force of nature, unstoppable and unyielding. The galaxies whispered stories of their might, and even the bravest warriors shuddered at the thought of facing them. Their ships, known as Varkar dreadnoughts, were huge, with dark metallic surfaces that seemed to absorb the light around them. Their guns could fire with the power to vaporize entire fleets, and their armor was so thick that no weapon could break through it. The Varkari flagship Karaz was the heart of their power. It was larger than any other ship in existence and filled with advanced technology. With every battle it fought, it grew more terrifying. The Varkari's warriors were trained from birth to fight, to kill, and to conquer. Their bodies were strong, their senses sharper than any human, and their skill with weapons unmatched. They were tall, powerful beings, with skin that shimmered like the stars themselves, making them appear almost otherworldly. Their leadership was equally frightening. Each fleet was commanded by a warlord known as the Karaz Khan, the leader of the Varkari, who was considered the ultimate warrior. No one ever questioned the Varkari's strength. Their presence alone was enough to send ripples of fear across the galaxy. No one had ever fought back with any success. The few who tried were crushed in moments. The galaxy had learned to live under the shadow of the Varkari, knowing that to resist them was to face certain destruction. But there was something strange going on. A rumor began to spread. It wasn't much at first, just whispers among the stars. Some said they saw a strange ship, one that was not Varkari, flying through their territory. It was small, almost insignificant compared to the Varkar dreadnoughts, but there was something about it that caught people's attention. Some of the bravest warriors started to talk about it. They said it wasn't like any ship they had ever seen. It was a human ship, and it was getting closer to Varkari-controlled space. At first, the Varkari didn't take the rumor seriously. A single human ship couldn't possibly be a threat to their mighty empire. They had seen the humans before, weak and unimportant, barely able to defend themselves. The Varkari had wiped out entire human fleets in seconds during previous encounters. So, when they heard that a single human ship was approaching, they didn't see it as a challenge. It was almost laughable. But as the ship drew nearer, something started to feel off. There was a strange energy surrounding it, something that even the Varkari couldn't ignore. Their scouts reported that the ship was moving faster than any human ship should have been able to. It wasn't much larger than a small fighter, but it had an unexpected speed and power. For the first time in many years, the Varkari felt a flicker of uncertainty. Still, they laughed it off. The Varkari were invincible, and no mere human could stop them. However, the closer this human ship got, the more it seemed like something different was happening. The ship wasn't just flying through Varkari space. It was heading straight into the heart of their empire. The Varkari commanders gathered in the Karaz Khan's war chamber. The whispers were growing louder. The Karaz Khan, himself, a towering figure whose very presence could send enemies fleeing, stared out into the stars. He was not one to be intimidated, but something about this human ship made his heart race. It wasn't just the ship itself. It was the way it moved, the way it defied everything the Varkari knew. "Prepare for the worst," the Karaz Khan ordered. "This human ship may be more dangerous than we think. No one enters our space without consequences." The Varkari were ready for battle. They would crush this human ship like they had done with so many others. But deep down, even the Karaz Khan couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this time. Something about this human ship felt wrong. It was small, yes, but there was an unsettling confidence in its approach. Little did the Varkari know, The battle they were about to face would be unlike any they had ever fought before. The small, human ship traveled quietly through the vast expanse of space, unnoticed by most of the galaxy. To anyone who might have looked, it seemed like any other forgotten relic drifting through the stars. Its metal hull was worn, with patches of rust and dents from countless years of use. Yet, despite its old appearance, it was not an ordinary ship. The ship was called the Aegis, and it was a symbol of human persistence. On board there was a crew of brave men and women, each one a testament to the strength of humanity. They were not warriors by nature, but had been trained for this one mission. The humans aboard the Aegis were not soldiers looking for glory or battle. They were explorers, scientists, engineers, and ordinary people who had been brought together by extraordinary circumstances. Commander Eva Jones stood on the bridge, staring out into the blackness of space. Her eyes were focused, calculating the distance to the edge of Varkari space. She had been through many missions before, but this was unlike any other. The humans had been sent on a desperate mission to gather intelligence on the Varkari, the most powerful force in the galaxy. However, what they didn't expect was that they would soon be in the very heart of the Varkari Empire, with no one to help them. The crew of the Aegis was small, only a handful of people, yet they had a singular goal. Their mission was critical, and they all knew that they might not make it back. The Varkari were far beyond the capabilities of human technology, yet the Aegis was their only hope. As the ship neared the edge of enemy territory, the crew began to sense the weight of the situation. Every one of them knew the risk they were taking. If the Varkari found them, they would be destroyed without hesitation. It was a harsh reality, but one they had accepted. There was no turning back now. They had come too far, and the mission was too important. Eva turned to her crew, her face a mask of determination. "Keep your focus. We've come this far. We don't turn back now." The crew nodded in silence, each of them aware of the gravity of what was happening. They had no weapons that could stand up to the might of the Varkari, no advanced technology to match their enemies. What they had was their wits, their resourcefulness, and the will to succeed against all odds. As the ship crossed into Varkari-controlled space, there was no turning back. The Aegis was now a target, and the crew had to rely on every bit of cunning they could muster to avoid detection. The ship's advanced cloaking systems kept them hidden for now, but the closer they got to the heart of Varkari territory, the more dangerous it became. Commander Eva knew that time was running out. They had to find what they needed and leave before they were discovered. The Varkari's fleet was too powerful. Even the thought of facing them head-on was terrifying. She couldn't afford to be caught. They had to be quick. The crew's plan was simple: infiltrate the Varkari's communications network, gather as much information as possible, and leave. But nothing ever went as planned, especially when it came to the Varkari. As the ship continued its journey deeper into enemy space, the crew began to feel the tension. They were close now, closer than they had ever been. A few more systems to pass and they would be inside the Varkari's inner territories. The stakes had never been higher. Suddenly, an alarm blared throughout the ship, snapping everyone to attention. Ava's heart raced as she turned toward the monitor. "Enemy ships detected," the voice of the sensor officer rang out. The Aegis was immediately thrown into high alert. Eva's mind raced as she weighed her options. The Varkari fleet was vast and they were closing in. A small human ship like the Aegis didn't stand a chance against their might. Yet they couldn't afford to run. Their mission was too important. "Shut down all non-essential systems," Eva ordered. "We need to stay hidden. Keep the cloak active and avoid detection at all costs." The crew worked quickly, switching off everything they didn't need. Their only hope now was to remain undetected for as long as possible. Outside the ship, the stars stretched endlessly, as if mocking their tiny presence in the vastness of space. The Varkari ships were on the move, and the Aegis was now a tiny, vulnerable speck in the dark sea of the universe. As they continued to drift silently, Ava couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping in. They were surrounded by the most powerful force the galaxy had ever known, and they had no backup, no allies. Only one small human ship stood between the Varkari and total control of the galaxy. Yet, despite the danger, Eva held on to one thought. Humanity had always been underestimated. Time and time again they had faced impossible odds, and time again they had survived. There was something special about humanity's will to fight, to persist no matter how dire the situation, and that was something the Varkari would soon learn to fear. But for now, all they could do was wait and pray that their plan would work. Time was running out, and soon the real test would begin. The Aegis crept deeper into Varkari-controlled space, its sleek, aging hull barely visible against the vast backdrop of stars. The crew remained in silence, each person focused on their task, but the tension was palpable. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity, each second ticking by as a reminder of how much was at stake. Commander Eva Jones stood at the front of the bridge, eyes scanning the control panels, her mind calculating their every move. The Varkari fleet was nearby, but they were still undetected. For now. "How are the cloaking systems holding up?" Eva asked, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We're still undetected," Lieutenant Harper, the ship's engineer, replied. "But it's not going to last forever. If we get too close to their fleet, they'll notice us." Eva nodded, knowing full well that their window of opportunity was shrinking. The mission to gather intelligence from the heart of Varkari territory was never going to be easy. But they had come this far, and they couldn't afford to fail. The crew had spent countless hours planning for this moment, running through every possible scenario, every way things could go wrong. But no one had predicted just how challenging this would be. The Varkari didn't just control space. They controlled the very flow of time. Every action the humans took, every move they made, seemed like it was being watched. How long until... "We reach the Varkari fleet?" Eva asked, her voice calm but her mind racing. 20 minutes, Lieutenant Harper answered. "We're nearing the edge of their patrol zone. If we're spotted, they'll be on us in seconds." The clock was ticking. Eva had no choice but to move forward. She had to trust her crew and their abilities. Every instinct told her to turn back, but there was no turning back now. The Aegis had already entered the lion's den, and the only way out was through. "Keep the systems running as quietly as possible. We can't afford any mistakes," Eva ordered. She glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of her crew. "We are doing this for something bigger than ourselves. We have to succeed, no matter what." As the ship inched closer to the heart of the Varkari fleet, the crew fell into a tense silence. The only sound was the low hum of the ship's engines and the occasional soft beeping from the control consoles. They were moving through enemy space, but they might as well have been invisible to the universe. Then, the first sign of trouble appeared. "Commander," Lieutenant Harper called out, his voice strained. "I'm detecting a small fluctuation in the cloaking field. It's nothing major, but it could be a problem if it gets worse." Eva's stomach tightened. She glanced at the main display, where the vast expanse of stars stretched out before them. It was difficult to see, but the fluctuation could mean the ship was slowly becoming visible, just enough to draw the attention of a nearby patrol. The last thing they needed was to be spotted by the Varkari. "Is it stable?" Eva asked, her voice calm despite the rising tension. "For now, yes," Harper replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "But we need to make a course correction or it could get worse." Eva quickly assessed their options. They couldn't afford to make a sharp turn. Any movement could give away their position. But they also couldn't remain on their current course. The slightest disturbance in their cloaking system could be the end of the mission. "We'll take a slight detour," Eva decided. "Just enough to give us some space, but not enough to attract attention. Keep monitoring the systems. We don't get another chance." The crew immediately got to work, adjusting the ship's trajectory and making the necessary changes to avoid any potential detection. The seconds stretched on, each one filled with the anticipation of what might come next. For a while everything seemed calm. The ship moved slowly and carefully, staying just out of range of the Varkari fleet's patrol zones. But then, a new problem arose. "Commander," The sensor officer's voice cut through the silence. "We're picking up a faint signal. It's coming from ahead. A Varkari scout ship. It's on a direct course for us." Eva's heart skipped a beat. The scout ship wasn't large, but it was fast and highly advanced. It was exactly the kind of ship that could detect even the smallest hint of an anomaly. The last thing they needed was for a Varkari scout to find them. "Can we outrun it?" Eva asked quickly. "It's possible," the sensor officer replied, "but we'd have to risk losing the cloaking system entirely. If we break speed, we may be visible to more patrols." Eva's mind raced. They had no choice but to take the risk. If they stayed hidden, the scout would eventually pass them by, but they would be stuck in the same area with little time to move. They needed to get closer to their objective, but they couldn't afford to be seen. "Prepare for a speed burst," Eva ordered. "On my mark, we make a quick move toward the main fleet. We need to get through this. Everyone, hold your positions." The crew tensed, each person silently bracing for what was about to happen. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder as they prepared to increase speed. Eva took a deep breath and looked at the crew, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "Now," she said. In an instant, the Aegis surged forward, cutting through the cold vacuum of space with newfound speed. The cloaking system flickered, almost giving way as the ship accelerated. The Varkari scout was still heading toward them, and for a split second, it seemed as though the ship would be spotted. But the Aegis was faster, and the Varkari scout ship veered off at the last moment, unaware of the small human ship in its path. The Aegis had made it past the scout. Eva let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. They had made it through, but the danger was far from over. The real challenge was still ahead, the heart of the Varkari fleet. The mission was still on, and the crew knew the hardest part was yet to come. But for now, they had made it through their first test. They were one step closer to their goal, and one step closer to facing the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. The Aegis glided silently through the vastness of space, its engines purring softly as it moved deeper into Varkari territory. The mission was at a critical juncture. After narrowly avoiding detection from the Varkari scout ship, the crew had managed to adjust their course and were now just on the edge of their destination. But the closer they got to the heart of the Varkari Empire, the greater the risk became. Every passing moment felt like a countdown, and the pressure weighed heavily on each crew member. Commander Eva Jones stood at the bridge, staring at the holographic star map before her. The Varkari fleet, a massive and well-organized force, was ahead. The map showed their patrol routes and the shifting patterns of their movements. It was an intricate web of watchful eyes, but somewhere within it lay their target, the central hub of Varkari intelligence. The Aegis had to be there, undetected, long enough to gather the information they needed. That was the plan, but the reality was far more complex. If they made a wrong move, even a slight one, everything could unravel. "Commander, we're approaching the edge of their main fleet," Lieutenant Harper called from the control panel, his voice tense. "There's a dense patrol zone in front of us. It's going to be difficult to avoid detection if we go in." Eva turned to him. "What's our best option?" "We can take a longer path around their perimeter," Harper said, "but that will take more time. Or we could go through the thickest part of their patrols, relying on our cloaking system to hide us. It's risky, but it could save us hours." Eva hesitated for a moment, weighing the choices. Time was against them. The longer they stayed in enemy space, the greater the chance they would be discovered. But if they tried the risky path, there was no guarantee the cloaking system would hold up. "Do it," she said finally, making the decision. "We can't waste time. Move as quickly as we can." The crew quickly set to work, adjusting the ship's course. The Aegis began to move forward, slipping through the gaps between the Varkari patrols. Every crew member was on edge, their eyes darting between the control panels, monitoring every small shift in the ship's systems. The atmosphere in the bridge was heavy with anticipation. The slightest mistake could give them away. As they moved deeper into Varkari space, the tension built. The patrol ships appeared closer now, their large forms gliding through the darkness, their weapons capable of obliterating anything in their path. The Aegis was nothing compared to these massive ships. It was small, fast, and designed for stealth. But even the best technology couldn't guarantee safety when surrounded by enemies so powerful. All systems are functioning within safe parameters, reported Lieutenant Hatcher, the ship's tactical officer. But we're pushing the limits. The cloaking field is starting to fluctuate again. Eva nodded. Keep monitoring it. We can't afford to be seen. They continued their course, the ship moving with the utmost care, as if walking on the edge of a blade. The crew worked in silence, their focus unwavering. Every small shift in the ship's speed, every fluctuation in the cloaking field, made their hearts race. The Varkari fleet seemed like a living, breathing entity, always on the move, always searching for the smallest trace of an enemy. Then as they passed through the most dangerous part of the patrol zone, something unexpected happened. The ship's sensors picked up a signal, faint but unmistakable. A transmission was being sent, and it was coming from within the Varkari fleet. "Commander, we've got a signal," Lieutenant Harper said, his voice tight with alarm. "It's not from a ship, it's coming from one of their stations deep in the fleet. The signal is encrypted, but we might be able to intercept it." Eva's mind raced. This was their opportunity. If they could intercept this transmission, they would have the vital information they needed. But they couldn't afford to make any noise. The risk of detection was too great. "Can we access it?" Eva asked, her voice steady, even though her heart was pounding in her chest. "It'll be tricky," Harper said. "But we can try. It's a long shot, though." Eva thought for a moment. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. If they could intercept the signal, they might be able to learn something crucial about the Varkari's plans. They had to take the risk. "Do it," Eva ordered. "If we get caught, we'll be ready to move, but we need that intel." The crew worked quickly, shifting the ship's focus toward the Varkari transmission. The ship's computers hummed as they attempted to crack the encryption. Eva watched as the seconds ticked by, each one more intense than the last. They were in the heart of enemy space, and the slightest misstep could lead to disaster. "Commander, we've got it," Harper said suddenly, his voice filled with a mix of relief and excitement. "The signal has been intercepted. I'm pulling the data now." Eva breathed a sigh of relief, though she knew they weren't out of danger yet. The information was crucial, but they still had to get out undetected. There was no time to celebrate. She turned to the rest of the crew. "Prepare for the exit," she said. "We've got what we need, now we get out of here." The Aegis continued to move, its cloaking field still holding strong as it edged away from the Varkari patrols. The crew worked quickly, their actions synchronized after so many hours of training. They had what they came for, but they still needed to make it out alive. As the ship veered toward the exit of the patrol zone, Eva couldn't shake the feeling that the Varkari were always watching, always waiting. The tension in the air was thick, and every passing moment felt like a heartbeat closer to disaster. Yet the crew of the Aegis remained calm. They had completed the mission, and now, all they needed to do was escape. The stars stretched out before them, a glittering path back to safety. But Eva knew that they were not safe yet. They still had a long way to go before they could relax, before they could celebrate their success. For now, the crew remained vigilant. They had done their part, but the true test was still ahead. Getting out of the Varkari fleet's reach and returning home with the crucial information. The mission wasn't over yet, but they had come far, and that was a victory in itself. The Aegis moved swiftly now, pushing through the outer boundaries of the Varkari patrol zones, its cloaking system still holding strong, though the tension in the air was palpable. Eva stood at the command console, her hands gripping the edge as she watched the dim lights of the control room flicker in sync with the slow hum of the ship's engines. The mission wasn't over, but they were closer to safety than they had ever been. The data they had gathered was invaluable. It contained information about the Varkari's strategic plans, their movements, and most importantly, their future objectives. This data could change the balance of power in the galaxy, but there was still one more hurdle to overcome: getting out of enemy space without drawing attention. The crew was silent, each person absorbed in their task, their eyes focused on their respective stations. The air was thick with anticipation. They had made it this far, but they all knew that the most difficult part of the mission lay ahead, leaving Varkari territory and returning home undetected. "Commander," Lieutenant Hatcher's voice cut through the silence. "We're almost out of their patrol zone, but we've got to keep the course steady. If we make any sudden movements, we could trigger a scan." Eva nodded without turning her head. She knew the risks. A mistake at this point could be catastrophic. The ship had to stay quiet, stay hidden, until they were well beyond the Varkari's reach. "We'll take it slow," she ordered. "Keep everything on course. No sudden movements. Let's get out of here in one piece." The ship drifted through the blackness of space, a tiny, almost invisible speck in the grand expanse. The crew remained alert, constantly monitoring the systems for any signs of detection. Every time a Varkari ship passed by, the tension in the room grew, and each member of the crew held their breath, waiting for the inevitable alarm. But the Aegis remained undetected, slipping through the darkness like a shadow. "Commander, we're getting close," Lieutenant Harper called out. "We're almost clear of their fleet. Once we're out of range, we can jump to hyperspace." Eva glanced at the star charts. The final stretch was in sight. Just a few more moments, and they would be free. But freedom was still distant. Every ship they passed, every shadow they passed beneath, was another reminder of how thin the line between success and failure was. Suddenly, an alert blared from the sensor station. "Commander, we've detected a shift in their patrols." The voice of the sensor officer was urgent, and Eva's heart skipped a beat. "They're adjusting their routes. If we don't move quickly, we'll be in the direct path of their lead ships." Eva's mind raced. The Varkari were unpredictable, and their patrols were constantly shifting. A change like this could mean they were now in the sights of their most advanced ships. They had to move, and fast. "Increase speed," Eva ordered, her voice firm but calm. "We can't stay in their path. We need to push ahead and make the jump to hyperspace before they notice us." The crew scrambled to make the adjustments. The engines hummed louder, and the small human ship surged forward, cutting through the darkness as it neared the end of the Varkari's reach. The sense of urgency was overwhelming. The ship's systems were beginning to strain under the pressure. Eva could feel the ship's age in every vibration beneath her feet, but there was no time to think about that now. Every second counted. "Commander, we've got a problem," Lieutenant Hatcher said, his voice tight with concern. "The cloaking field is starting to destabilize. If we push any harder, we'll lose it." Eva didn't hesitate. "Do what you can to stabilize it. We can't afford to be seen now." The ship's systems flickered, and Eva knew they were running out of time. The Varkari could be closing in on them. The Aegis was their only hope of bringing this mission to a successful conclusion. They couldn't afford to fail now. "We're almost there," Lieutenant Harper called out, his voice crackling with excitement. "Just a few more seconds, and we'll be out of their range." The Aegis shot forward, and Eva felt the shift in the air. As the ship finally began to break free from the dense patrol zone, the stars ahead were beginning to shift into familiar patterns, a sign that they were about to leave Varkari-controlled space behind. Then, the unthinkable happened. A blinding flash of light filled the control room. For a split second, everything seemed to freeze. The ship's systems went dark. The hum of the engines ceased. The silence was deafening. Eva's heart raced. What had just happened? "Status report," she demanded, her voice steady, though her mind was in chaos. "Power failure," Lieutenant Hatcher responded quickly. "The cloaking system just overloaded. We've lost the stealth field. The Varkari will see us any second now." The alarms blared, once again louder this time. The Aegis was no longer invisible. The human ship was exposed, and every Varkari ship in the area could now detect them. Eva's mind raced as she weighed their options. They couldn't fight the Varkari. They had no chance against their advanced weapons. Their only hope now was to escape. "Get us out of here," she ordered. "Activate the hyperdrive now." The crew worked in a frenzy, trying to get the systems back online. The Aegis was still alive, but the clock was ticking. Eva's eyes stayed fixed on the monitors, watching the Varkari ship slowly come into view as they began to close in on the ship. The overwhelming might of the enemy fleet loomed larger with every passing moment. Then, with a sudden surge of power, the hyperdrive kicked in. The ship jolted forward, and the familiar feeling of hyperspace enveloped them. The stars stretched and blurred, and the cold silence of space faded away. They had made it. The Aegis had broken free from the Varkari fleet. But even as they disappeared into hyperspace, Eva knew they were far from safe. There would be no easy return. They would have to keep moving, stay ahead of the Varkari, and make it back to their base without being caught. But for now, they had survived. They had the information. The mission had been completed. As the stars around them settled into the familiar lines of hyperspace, Eva allowed herself a brief moment of relief. It was fleeting, but it was enough. The hardest part was over. For now, the Aegis glided through hyperspace, the hum of the engines now a steady rhythm that calmed the tense nerves of the crew. After days of navigating the dangers of Varkari space, the crew had made it through, but there was no time to rest. The mission was complete, but the journey was far from over. Eva knew that the real challenge had only just begun. "We're out of their territory," Lieutenant Harper confirmed, his voice more relaxed now that the danger of being discovered had passed. "The Varkari won't be able to track us in hyperspace. We should be safe for now." Eva nodded, but the weight of the mission still pressed heavily on her mind. They had what they came for, but that data was more than just valuable intel. It was a game changer. If the Varkari ever got wind of what the crew of the Aegis had uncovered, the galaxy could spiral into a conflict like no other. "We can't afford to relax just yet," Eva replied, her gaze never leaving the view of hyperspace through the bridge's windows. "We need to get back to the fleet and analyze this data. We don't know who else might be after it, and if the Varkari ever catch up, we won't be able to escape again." The crew, though tired, remained alert. They had done something extraordinary, but they all knew that their mission was still far from finished. They needed to ensure that the information didn't fall into the wrong hands. And the only way to do that was to return to their base and deliver it safely. "Navigator," Eva called, turning to the officer at the helm. "Set a course for the rendezvous point. It's going to be a long journey, but we can't afford any delays." The officer, a quiet but efficient member of the crew, quickly input the coordinates. The ship hummed as it adjusted course, heading toward the safety of the human fleet. As they moved further away from Varkari space, Eva couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the pressure of the mission seemed to lift. But the peace was short-lived. "Commander," Lieutenant Hatcher's voice broke the silence. "We've got an incoming transmission. It's encrypted, but I've never seen anything like this before." Eva's heart skipped a beat. An encrypted transmission was a rare occurrence. But something about this one felt different. "Can you trace it?" Hatcher shook his head. "No, Commander. The encryption is unlike anything we've encountered before. It's as if someone is intentionally masking the origin." Eva stood up straighter. The Varkari were masters of encryption, but they weren't the only ones with advanced technology. "Could it be someone else? Someone who had intercepted their mission? Can we decrypt it?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "We're working on it," Hatcher replied, "but it's going to take time." Eva paced slowly around the bridge, her mind running through possibilities. The Varkari could be closing in on them, trying to capture the data they had stolen. Or perhaps someone else had learned about their mission. But who could it be? The Federation, the one human organization capable of such advanced tech, was supposed to be their ally. "We'll need to remain cautious," Eva finally said, turning back to the crew. "Don't assume it's the Varkari just yet. Prepare for all possibilities." Hours passed as the Aegis made its way toward the rendezvous point, the encrypted transmission still hanging over them like a cloud. Each passing minute felt like an eternity. The crew continued their work, monitoring their surroundings, checking the ship's systems, and running diagnostics. The silence in the room was thick, broken only by the occasional hum of machinery or the soft tapping of fingers on touchscreens. Then, just as the ship was nearing the midpoint of its journey, the transmission was decoded. The voice that came through the comms was calm, almost eerily so. "This is Commander Lila Hayes of the Federation Special Operations. Your mission has been compromised." Ava's breath caught in her chest. Federation Special Operations? That wasn't supposed to be possible. They hadn't been informed of any Federation forces in this sector. The mission was strictly a covert operation, one that only a handful of people knew about. "Commander Hayes, this is Eva Jones of the Aegis. What do you mean, compromised?" Eva demanded, trying to keep her voice steady despite the shock flooding through her. "We've been tracking your ship for the last few days," Hayes continued, her voice cold but professional. "The information you've gathered is vital, but it's also dangerous. We've had reports of an unknown faction in the Outer Rim, a faction that seems to have ties with the Varkari, and they've been after that data for quite some time." Eva's mind raced. An unknown faction? Ties to the Varkari? This was something entirely new, something that had never been considered. Who could be working with the Varkari outside of their empire? And why hadn't they known about this faction earlier? "You need to get back to Federation space," Hayes continued. "Your ship is no longer safe. That data is too valuable to fall into the wrong hands, and if you don't make it back soon, your entire crew will be at risk." Ava's stomach tightened. She had always trusted the Federation, but this new information made her question everything. Could there be a mole within their ranks? Were they walking into a trap? "We're on our way back," Eva replied, her voice tight. "But we'll need more details. What exactly do you know about this faction? And why are we just hearing about them now?" "We'll discuss it once you're back," Hayes answered quickly. "But know this, the Varkari aren't the only ones interested in your mission. If you want to stay alive, you need to move fast, and you need to be ready for anything." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the crew in stunned silence. The weight of the conversation hung in the air. The Varkari were a known enemy, but this new faction, whoever they were, represented an entirely different kind of threat. "Commander?" Lieutenant Harper's voice broke through the silence. "We've got incoming ships on the radar. They're not Varkari, but they're closing in fast." Eva felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The unknown faction was already here. The real battle for survival had just begun. "Brace yourselves," Eva said, her voice resolute, though her mind was still reeling from the new revelations. "We're not alone out here, but we've come this far. We're not backing down now." The Aegis sped forward, its engines pushing harder, faster. Whatever was ahead, they would face it together. There was no turning back now.